I do want to talk about the political backlash from this incident. Almost immediately, there was a partisan feud over this. Can you explain why?
So I would say that the political backlash really began when residents learned that the disaster um, did not qualify for financial relief from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And FEMA is largely set up to handle large-scale disasters like hurricanes, flooding, tornadoes, and most of the financial aid that they provide is centered around property damage. FEMA did send a response team to the crash site about 2 weeks later, and DeWine, in conjunction with FEMA, came out and issued a statement explaining, the support that FEMA was providing to East Palestine. But I would say another layer of criticism really started to swell when President Joe Biden visited Ukraine last week ahead of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And Republicans really took this opportunity to criticize not only Biden, but Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for not visiting the crash site sooner. Though I do want to say that, again, as I mentioned earlier, NTSB, the EPA was on the ground. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan has visited the site at least twice. But yes, I mean, this has really become a huge partisan feud and an example of, how all local politics can in many ways be nationalized. And of course, I can talk more about the dynamics there later in our conversation.
Let's talk about who has visited and the players that haven't visited yet. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg did visit, but the timing of his visit was really criticized, amongst other things. Why is he getting clobbered at his response over this?
So Pete Buttigieg is really a prominent figure in the Democratic Party. He's been floated as a possible presidential contender for 2024 and, more likely 2028, though he has announced no plans to run. He's long been a target for Republicans given his national prominence. And he has not really given, the clearest answer as to why he waited so long to visit. He has said that he wished he sent out a tweet, a few weeks after the derailment expressing his concern. And he has said that he wished he spoke out publicly sooner. But in terms of waiting to visit, he suggested when he did end up visiting last week that he was following normal protocol. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a number of other federal agencies have responded: the National Transportation Safety Board, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They were all, with the exception of FEMA, but the NTSB and the EPA were on the ground within days. And in defending their response, the White House has really highlighted those two agencies and how they have been actively involved in the cleanup and ensuring that the air, the water, the soil there are safe.
As you said, Buttigieg is a rising star in the Democratic Party. Point blank, how bad is this for him politically?
So if he were to run for higher office, I mean, this is certainly something that would be used in Republican attack ads against him. He's obviously a Democrat, and as I mentioned, his name has been floated as a potential presidential contender for 2024 or 2028. He will most likely face ongoing questions about his response and the federal government's response in general from the House Oversight Committee, which is led by Republicans and has announced a probe into the DOT's response. Some Republicans, including Senator Marco Rubio, have called for his resignation. And, impeachment prospects also have not been ruled out, but moving an impeachment trial through the Democrat-controlled Senate is is highly unlikely. And I don't believe that any Republicans have gone as far to suggest that he definitively should be impeached over this. And I think it's also important to note that Republicans have called for the impeachment of many Biden administration officials, including Biden himself, and, more recently, Department of Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas over his role in the border crisis. So this is definitely something that's not going away for him anytime soon, but whether it affects his political future, I think, that there's a lot to play out there, including the long-term effects of this disaster in East Palestine, and, how it really affected the environment, and, whatever findings the Oversight Committee is able to unearth in terms of communications between federal officials about their response and just what they did and did not do in the wake of this derailment.